Welcome to episode 3 of the Citizen Annan show. Some of our followers have been asking me, why the show? And I wanted to just mention that it started many years ago. I used to have a radio program called My Ghana on Pravda Radio. And on that program, we used to have a phone in that explored a lot of these same issues. We looked at by institutions, how development could be taken forward in Ghana, and what were the major constraints in our body politic, in our governance institutions, and all our other institutions that would help the country run. It's just to say that this series is going to stick on the theme of justice and freedom and unpack it step by step into all the other areas that will lead us eventually to explore what individuals, what groups, what people can do to ensure that the change that we want to see is the change that will happen. At a later stage, I hope to make it more interactive, so there might be feedback and interviews with other personnel. But a lot of it will depend on you. The Citizen Annan show is extremely thankful to all of you for your comments and for liking my page. As you may remember, we've been following a theme of justice, and from then on we're looking at how to achieve it. Firstly, through personal responsibilities and working on ourselves, becoming aware and managing ourselves so that we can promote justice and equality for Project Ghana. But today I want us to focus a little bit on how we move from the individual to the collective. How can we start to affect our brothers and sisters around us, our community, our friends, fellow workers, and indeed political systems and political parties that seem to hold a very strong prime place in the fortunes and future of Ghana. Over the years, my experience with working throughout the world in trying to change systems and trying to find effective systems that can enhance development taught me and my team at the time in the UN a certain number of things. That every institution, every system you deal with, every setup has its own internal values and system, has its own internal values and norms. So that if you take, let's say, an institution like, let's say, the Lands Commission. A lot of people have many things to say about the Lands Commission, about how it works, about how it doesn't work and stuff. But there's an internal culture. If you take schools, if you take churches, these institutions have their own values and norms. So it is the value and norms that these institutions have that will guide and propel and be the mainstream that puts in place what they do. So let's look at this a little bit more closely. So supposing if you're a new service personnel, national service personnel, you've been placed into an institution, and I've experienced this a number of times when young people have come to me, sometimes quite often distressed, because they're very idealistic. They've finished their tertiary education, they've maybe been placed in a school, in a rural school, to help teach. And they came to me distressed because
what they had thought were the values and norms that were going to be used to enhance teaching, propel, help the young children learn, they found it to be totally different. In other words, the established culture in that particular school, in that particular district's education system, was one that showed that the people we pay with our tax money to teach our children did not particularly care. What happened to this one young man in particular? He actually came to me in tears, stressing that the teachers, the headmaster had called him to say, you know something, you are coming here, you're working all the hours God gave you, you are teaching these children, you are doing extracurricular activities for these children. Don't you realize that one day they'll become better educated than you, smarter than you, and take your job? And that was the prevailing culture and the values that the senior people in that particular educational institution and educational setup, because it seemed to have run through the entire district, were putting forward. So when you come with your individual attitude and commitment that, you know what, I want to make a difference. I want to make sure that the education that I had is improved upon. So I'm going to give my best. Then suddenly you find out that the system in place has these values and norms that you will have to fight. So that's what I mean by the collective values and norms of any institution. Now, I'm not saying that all the values and norms in well-established institutions are negative, but they have a momentum of their own. Once a historical precedent has been set, very often it perpetuates generation after generation, and any newcomer, any new person with a different thrust, different commitment, will find it extremely challenging to push aside some of those negative values and bringing about a new collective thinking. Now this, of course, you will find in established political parties, you'll find in traditional authority. I've given you an example of what happens in public service, in the education sector, but you find that constantly through the health service, the agricultural service, all the services that are supposed to bring about the citizens' rights, bring about and support the citizen to be able to work and live and look after his family, are challenged by these kind of attitudes. So what to do? We spoke at the previous episode about the efforts that can be undertaken to change self towards being more engaged with justice and equity and equality and all the things that we talk about, but we fail to give real meaning to. How do we do this when we are dealing with established institutions? The first issue is, of course, it's not easy. The second issue is that the self-awareness that you have gained and created, the self-management that you have developed or that you will continue to develop, will manifest itself in certain social skills, certain abilities to be convincing. As mentioned earlier, not only through, I should say, your words, and your thinking, but through your specific actions that you can show this institution that may be quite challenged that another way is possible. So, if you take, for example, the fact that you walk into a tertiary health institution, for that matter, Konfanochi or Kolebu, and you see the staff, sometimes you have to be even critical about the way they are moving around the hospital. As if there was no matter of urgency ever in any of the cases they deal with. And in my own experience, when I have questioned staff as to why maybe there's a febrile baby, a mother holding their baby who has collapsed and appears to be on his or her last legs, the attitude of the staff has been, oh, don't worry, we've seen plenty of cases like this. And to be honest, in one particular case that I witnessed, the child actually died, with a lot of concern and consternation from people around, including myself. But the point is, there was no proper investigation ever established into the death of that child. There was not even a proper reprimand of the lackadaisical attitude of the staff. And indeed, even the parents of the child sort of gave up and said, okay, well, this is Ghana. And so, let's move on. Now that is the challenge we need to address. How can we as individuals affect a system that quite often appears totally hopeless? How can we sit down with people in political parties, for example, that feel that the order of the day is that to get elected as a party official, to get elected as a parliamentary candidate, you need to spray the candidates very lavishly with money, flat screen televisions, refrigerators, all to be elected. And the sadness of this is that it's considered, well, the norm. These are our new values of today. That in politics, to get on, you have to indeed spend money. But I would argue that these are the very seeds that lead to what I often call the 4 C's. It leads to the corruption, the collusion, the co-option, and the coercion in our system. We'll have a chance to discuss at greater length in other episodes about these issues. But it's important that once you've established yourself as a man, a woman, a young man, an old woman, that you will not succumb to a system that has these values and these norms. Then you have to be prepared to do battle against a well-established system that has people who are in place that feel that their bread is particularly well buttered on that side of the system. So here is what we have to try to wrap up and conclude. Number 1, if you want change in a system, you first of all have to identify and be clear what institution you are in. Whether it's the public service, whether it's a political party, whether it's a religious institution, and actually, very importantly, whether you're part of our traditional authority. Because our traditional authority holds a lot of sway. Most Ghanaians will tell you that, oh, we respect our chieftaincy system, we respect our traditional family. But very often the norms and values within that system have been perverted, have been broken, have been used to the advantage of the few against the many. And we can certainly not say that they're very just. So you have to be then ready to be a little bit of a lone ranger. You have to be in a position, put yourself in a position to fight the system. Now, that fight does not have to be necessarily a vicious or indeed a violent fight, but it's going to be your positioning through what you've gained about who you are that is going to show your social skills, your commitment, your, let's call it emotional intelligence, that will get people to come to you in time, and for you to lead them in a new way that will eventually affect the systems and structures that you are dealing with in the institution.